The first words out of her mouth after 10 years were, "4 million, I'm your daughter. I deserve half of that." She didn't ask how I'd survived when I was too sick to stand. She didn't ask what it felt like to wake up alone, abandoned by the only child I ever had. No, she came into Harold's mansion during the will reading, pointed at me with those sharp, accusing eyes, and called me a thief in front of everyone. And I sat there in silence, letting her rant, letting her throw every ugly word at me. While in my heart, I knew something she didn't. I had been holding on to the kind of truth that could destroy her. And that man she ran away with. For 10 years, I never touched it, never wanted to use it. Because even when she left me to die, she was still my daughter. But standing there threatening me for her share, Susan had no idea what I had waiting for her. And by the time she found out, it was far too late. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We're creating a community of incredible people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. Susan came into this world screaming, and I suppose she never really stopped. Not that I minded the noise. Then, after 12 hours of labor at St. Mary's, her cry sounded like victory. The nurses kept saying what a beautiful baby she was. All that dark hair and those wide eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. I was 35 and alone. Her father had made his opinion clear about unplanned pregnancies the day I told him, disappearing faster than spit on a griddle, so it was just Susan and me in that little 2-bedroom rental on Oak Street where the radiator clanged all winter, and the kitchen faucet dripped a steady rhythm that became our lullaby. I worked the night shift at County General. Easier to find childcare for a sleeping baby than a wakeful one. Mrs. Kowalski next door would sit in my living room with her knitting while Susan slept, and I'd come home at 7 in the morning, smelling like disinfectant and other people's pain. Susan would be awake by then, standing in her crib with that expectant look, hands reaching up like I held the keys to everything good in the world. Maybe I did give her too much. When she wanted piano lessons, I picked up extra shifts. When she outgrew her clothes every few months, I bought new instead of secondhand, because I remembered the shame of wearing other children's cast-offs. When she decided she needed a car for her 16th birthday, not just any car, but a red Honda Civic because everyone would see me in it. Mom, I worked doubles for 3 months straight. She was smart. I'll give her that. Honor roll through high school, accepted to state college with a partial scholarship. I covered the rest with a second mortgage on the house that was finally almost paid off. She called it an investment in her future. I called it love. Derek showed up during her junior year like a stain you don't notice until it sets in deep. 28 to her 20, with oil under his fingernails and a smile that worked too hard. He drove a motorcycle that made the neighbors' dogs bark and wore leather jackets. In July, Susan brought him to Sunday dinner once, and he spent the meal talking about get-rich-quick schemes while cutting his pot roast into pieces so small a child could have managed them. "He's got vision, Mom," Susan said after he left, scraping his barely touched plate into the garbage. "He's not going to be working construction forever." I bit my tongue. At 55, I'd learned that some arguments only push people toward what you're arguing against. But Derek had plans, all right, the kind that required cash up front and promised returns that sounded like fairy tales. Susan started missing classes to help him with business meetings. Her grades slipped. She stopped calling as often. When she did call, it was to ask for money, just a loan. "Mom, just until Derek's deal comes through." I should have seen it coming. Maybe I did see it, but seeing and accepting are different animals entirely. The heart attack hit me on a Tuesday morning while I was making coffee. One moment I was measuring grounds into the filter. The next, I was on the kitchen floor with my left arm on fire and my chest squeezed in a vice. The paramedic said I was lucky. Susan was still asleep upstairs when it happened, or I might not have made it. 3 days in cardiac ICU, 2 weeks in the regular ward, a month of cardiac rehab that left me shaky and uncertain. Like learning to walk on a ship in rough seas. The doctors used words like extensive damage and lifestyle changes and lucky to be alive. They didn't use words like cure or full recovery. Susan came to the hospital every day at first. She brought magazines and flowers and sat in the vinyl chair beside my bed, updating me on her classes, her job at the campus bookstore, Derek's latest venture. But I could see her checking her phone, tapping her foot, glancing at the clock on the wall. She had the restless energy of someone performing duty instead of desire. "You're going to be fine, Mom," she said, patting my hand with fingers that felt cool and distant. "The doctor said, you just need to take it easy for a while." Taking it easy meant I couldn't work. No work meant no income, and no income meant... The mortgage payments started piling up like snow in a long winter. The medical bills arrived in steady waves. Insurance covered some, but deductibles and co-pays nibbled away at my savings like mice in grain. Susan helped during my recovery. She drove me to follow-up appointments, picked up prescriptions, and made sure I took my medications on schedule. But I noticed things. How she left the room when Derek called. How she whispered into her phone late at night. How she started coming home later and later until some nights she didn't come home at all. How Derek's construction jobs never seemed to require him to be anywhere during normal business hours. How Susan suddenly had new clothes, expensive ones that she claimed were gifts. One morning, while she was out, I found papers scattered on her desk, invoices for work that didn't exist, bank account numbers that didn't match anything legitimate, Derek's name on documents that made my stomach turn. I gathered them up, hands shaking, and hid them in my bedroom closet. Evidence of something wrong, something illegal, something that could destroy my daughter's future. I told myself I'd talk to her about it. Explain what I'd found. Give her a chance to walk away from whatever Derek was pulling her into. I never got the chance. "I'm staying at Derek's," she'd say when I asked. "It's closer to campus." Mart, she sat me down at the kitchen table where I'd helped her with homework for 12 years. She'd made coffee, my decaf now, doctor's orders, and set out my best china cups like this was a special occasion. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important." I knew the way she sat with her back straight and her hands folded. The way she looked just past my shoulder instead of meeting my eyes. The way she spoke like she'd rehearsed this conversation in her head until it sounded reasonable. Derek got an opportunity in Phoenix. Business opportunity. Good money. It's a real chance for us to start fresh. I waited. "The thing is, it starts next month. And she cleared her throat. "I can't waste my life nursing you. Derek can give me the life I deserve." Waste. The word sat between us like something that had died and started to smell. "You're my daughter," I said. "And you're my mother, which means you should want what's best for me." She left on a Thursday morning. I watched from the window as she loaded her things into Derek's pickup, moving with the brisk efficiency of someone eager to be gone. When she finished, she came back inside just long enough to grab her purse from the kitchen counter. "I'll call when we get settled," she said, not meeting my eyes. The sound of Derek's truck pulling away was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. Lonelier than the silence after her father left. Lonelier than sitting in hospital waiting rooms. By myself. It was the sound of being truly, completely abandoned. The house felt enormous with just me in it. Every room echoed. The refrigerator hummed too loud. The clock in the hallway ticked like it was counting down to something final. I spent the first week in bed, partly because I was still weak, mostly because getting up meant facing another day of nobody calling, nobody coming home, nobody needing me for anything. The physical therapist called twice to reschedule missed appointments. The mailbox filled with bills I couldn't pay and circulars for things I couldn't afford. But nurses don't stay down long. It's not in our nature. On the 8th day, I got up at 6 sharp in the morning, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a calculator. I added up what I owed and what I had coming in from disability. The numbers didn't balance, but they weren't impossible either. I called Dr. Morrison's office and asked about part-time positions. Light duty, I said. Maybe home health visits for stable patients. Something to keep my hand in until I was strong enough for regular shifts. Martha, said Linda, the office manager who'd known me for 15 years. Are you sure you're ready? Ready as I'll ever be. The first job she offered was perfect for what I needed, and probably what I deserved. Harold Whitmore, 88 years old, widowed, diabetic, recovering from pneumonia, 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, just enough to help with medication management and light housekeeping, just enough to keep me from losing the house. Harold lived in the mansion on Elm Street that everyone in town knew but nobody really talked about. 3 stories of red brick and white columns behind an iron gate that was always closed. His wife had died 5 years earlier, and since then, he'd become one of those rich old men who fade into their own houses like ghosts. The first time I knocked on his door, he answered, wearing a wool cardigan with food stains down the front and slippers that had seen better decades. You're the nurse, he said. Not a question. I'm Martha. I'm here to help with your medications and whatever else you need. He studied me with pale blue eyes that still held intelligence even if his body was failing. You look tired. Long night? I said, which was true enough. Most of my nights were long now. He stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like dust, old man, and something faintly medicinal. But it was warm, and the furniture was good, and there were books everywhere, on shelves, on tables, stacked beside chairs, like old friends waiting their turn. Kitchen's this way, Harold said, shuffling ahead of me. That's where I keep the pill bottles. Can't remember what I'm supposed to take when anymore. We spent that first morning organizing his medications into a weekly dispenser, the kind with little compartments marked Monday through Sunday. Harold watched me work with the focused attention of someone who'd been managing alone too long. You're very precise, he said. Precision keeps people alive. He smiled at that, the first real smile I'd seen in months from anyone. My wife used to say the same thing about cooking, Harold, she'd say. A recipe is a prescription for happiness, but you have to follow it exactly. I looked up from sorting his pills. Sounds like a wise woman. She was. 52 years we were married. I still set 2 places at breakfast sometimes. I didn't say anything to that. What was there to say? Some loneliness runs too deep for words. But I came back 3 days later and 3 days after that. Harold always had the coffee made by the time I arrived. He'd sit at the kitchen table and watch me work, sometimes talking about his late wife, Rose, sometimes asking about my life. I kept my answers general at first. Nursing was my career. I had a daughter. I'd lived in town most of my life. Where's your daughter now? He asked one morning while I was checking his blood sugar. Phoenix, I said. She moved there for work. He nodded like that made sense, but I caught him watching my face in a way that suggested he heard what I wasn't saying. After a month, he started asking me to stay for lunch. Simple things. Soup from a can, sandwiches cut in precise triangles, tea that we drank from china cups with tiny painted flowers. He'd tell me stories about his business, the paper mill that had employed half the town for 40 years. I'd tell him about particularly difficult patients or funny things that happened at the hospital. It was during one of those lunches that I realized I'd started looking forward to coming to Harold's house. Not just because I needed the money, though I did, but because for 4 hours 3 times a week, I felt useful again. Needed, like someone's day was better because I was in it. Harold must have sensed it too, because he started finding reasons for me to stay longer. His back hurt, and could I help him with some stretching exercises? The light bulb in the hallway was burned out, and the ladder made him nervous. Could I possibly look at this rash on his arm that might be nothing but worried him anyway? I didn't mind. His house was peaceful in a way mine hadn't been since Susan left. No echoes, no ticking clocks counting down to loneliness. Just quiet. Rooms filled with the accumulated weight of a long, well-lived life. "Martha," Harold said one afternoon while I was helping him organize his medical records, "do you ever think about what comes next?" After all this, he gestured vaguely at the pill bottles, the blood pressure cuff, the whole careful architecture of managing an aging body. What happens when the managing stops working? I looked at him. Really looked. 88 years old, increasingly. Frail, no children, no close relatives that I'd ever heard him mention, just a big house full of memories, and a nurse who came 3 days a week to make sure he took his pills on time. "I think," I said carefully, "that most of us hope we'll have someone who cares about what happens to us." He smiled. "That's a good answer. Very diplomatic. I try. Rose always said I was lucky to have people who cared. She was right about that, too." It wasn't until later, driving home past the cemetery where Harold's wife was buried, that I understood what he'd been asking. Not what comes next for people in general, but what comes next for him specifically, and maybe what comes next for the people who care about him. I'd been so focused on getting through each day, paying bills, recovering, my strength, pretending I wasn't listening for phone calls that never came, that I'd forgotten how good it felt to be genuinely needed. Not manipulated or guilted into helping, but chosen for it. Harold chose me. Every morning when he made coffee for 2, every lunch when he set out the good china, every story he shared about Rose, every question he asked about my life, every small trust he placed in my hands. Maybe that's what comes next, I thought. Not the grand plans we make when we're young and think we have forever, but the small daily choices to care about each other when forever starts feeling finite. Harold died on a Tuesday morning in April, peacefully in his sleep like he'd requested. I found him when I arrived for his morning medications, hands folded over his chest as if he'd arranged himself for the occasion. Even in death, he was considerate. "How did you even know?" I asked quietly. Susan's eyes flicked away. "News travels," Derek grinned. "Small-town obituaries in the paper. Amazing what people notice when there's serious money involved." "Get out," I said. "Excuse me. Get out of this office. Get out of this town. Get out of my life again." Susan's face flushed red. "This isn't over, Mother. Not by a long shot." They left in a cloud of threats and posturing, Derek's voice echoing down the hallway about lawyers and contested wills and what happens to people who think they can steal from family. Mr. Brennan adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sullivan, the will is ironclad. Mr. Whitmore was very clear about his intentions. But I was already worrying. Not about the money or the house. I was worrying about what would happen when they realized I wasn't going to just hand over half of Harold's gift because my daughter demanded it." Derek didn't look like the type who accepted no gracefully. They came to the mansion 3 days later. I was in Harold's kitchen, my kitchen now, though it still felt like borrowing, making tea when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Derek's pickup in the circular drive, engine running like they planned a quick getaway. Susan had traded the designer jeans for a sundress and sandals, playing the part of the grieving daughter come to visit her. Poor, confused mother. Derek wore khakis and a polo shirt, his attempt at respectable. "Hello, Mom." Susan kissed my cheek, a dry peck that smelled like expensive perfume. "We thought we should talk, really talk this time." I led them to Harold's sitting room, with its leather chairs and built-in bookshelves. Susan perched on the edge of the sofa like she might flee at any moment. Derek sprawled in Harold's favorite armchair like he belonged there. "This is someplace," Derek said, eyes cataloging everything, the silver picture frames, the crystal decanters, the Persian rug that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Must be worth a fortune just in furniture," I said. "Harold lived here for 60 years. It was his home, and now it's yours." Susan's voice had that careful tone she'd used as a child when she wanted something. "Mom, I've been thinking about what happened at the lawyer's office. I was upset, shocked. I didn't handle it well." You demanded half my inheritance. I was emotional. But Derek and I have been talking, and we realize this could be good for all of us. You shouldn't be rattling around in this big house alone. It's not safe. Derek leaned forward. What Susan's saying is, we could move in, help you manage things, the property, the finances, big responsibility for one person. I set my teacup down carefully. I'm managing fine for now. Derek said, but you're what, 65? Things change fast, at your age. Falls, heart problems, memory issues. Better to have family around. Family. I let the word sit there. Where was family when I was sick and couldn't work? Where was family when I lost 15 pounds because I couldn't afford groceries? And medications both? Susan flushed. That's not fair. I had my own life to build with him. I nodded toward Derek. How's that working out? Something flickered across Derek's face. Anger maybe, or calculation. We're doing great. Actually, Phoenix was good to us. Real. Good. But Susan missed her family, missed you. The lie sat between us like something dead. I think you should leave, I said. Derek's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. You sure about that? Big house like this, valuable stuff everywhere, lot of crime these days, old ladies living alone, they're targets. Are you threatening me? Just pointing out facts. Worlds, a dangerous place, good to have people looking out for you. Susan stood abruptly. Derek, let's go. She needs time to think. At the door, she turned back. Mom, we're staying at the Comfort Inn on Route 9, room 127. We're not leaving town until this gets resolved. One way or another, I watched Derek's pickup disappear down Elm Street. And for the first time since Harold died, I felt truly alone in the big house. That night, every creak of the old floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every rustle of wind in the trees sounded like someone testing. The windows. I double-checked all the locks before bed. The next morning, I found Harold's study exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses still folded on the mahogany desk, his fountain pen lying beside a half-finished crossword puzzle, even his coffee mug, unwashed, sitting next to a stack of financial documents. I'd avoided this room since he died. It felt too much like trespassing. But Derek's threats had changed something in me. The way he'd looked around the sitting room like he was appraising inventory. The casual mention of crime, of accidents that happened to old ladies living alone. I sat in Harold's leather chair and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a manila envelope with my name written in Harold's careful script, underneath a smaller envelope marked for Martha when the time comes. My hands shook as I opened it. My dear Martha, the letter began. If you're reading this, then someone has come for what I've given you, and you need to know you're not defenseless. I set the letter down and opened the manila envelope. Insurance, policies, bank statements, property deeds, but underneath, something else. A private investigator's report dated just 3 months ago. Derek Morrison, age 38, multiple arrests for fraud, identity theft, money laundering, currently under investigation by Phoenix PD for a check-cashing scheme that bilked elderly residents out of their savings. And there, in black and white, Susan's signature on several of the fraudulent documents. My daughter wasn't just Derek's girlfriend, she was his partner. Harold's letter continued. I hired Mr. Collins to investigate after you mentioned your daughter. Had moved to Phoenix with a man who made you uncomfortable. I could see the worry in your eyes whenever you spoke of her, and I thought you should know what kind of people they really are. I hope you never need this information, but if you do, use it wisely. At the bottom of the report was a handwritten note from the investigator. They've targeted at least 6 other elderly individuals in the Phoenix area. The pattern is always the same. Reconnect with arranged family members who come into money, manipulate them into sharing assets, then disappear. Currently wanted for questioning in 2 cases. I leaned back in Harold's chair, the papers scattered. Across his desk, like evidence in a crime already committed. For 10 years, I'd carried my own secrets about Derek and Susan. Documents I'd hidden away out of some misguided maternal hope that my daughter might find her way back to decency. Now I had Harold's evidence too. Professional, documented, undeniable proof of what they really were. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. In the back, behind winter coats I rarely needed, was the shoebox where I'd hidden those papers from 10 years ago. Derek's invoices for non-existent construction jobs. Bank account numbers that led nowhere legitimate. Susan's handwriting on documents that made my stomach turn. I'd told myself I was protecting her, giving her a chance to walk away from whatever Derek had drawn her into. But she hadn't walked away. She'd gotten better at it. I spread both sets of documents across Harold's desk, mine from 10 years ago, his from 3 months ago. The progression was clear. Derek hadn't reformed, he'd evolved, and Susan had evolved with him. Outside Harold's study window, a car slowed as it passed the house. Dark sedan, tinted windows. It circled the block twice, before disappearing. They were watching, waiting, planning their next move. I picked up Harold's phone and dialed the number on the investigator's business card. "Mr. Collins, this is Martha Sullivan. I believe Harold Whitmore hired you to investigate Derek Morrison and Susan Sullivan." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for your loss. Harold was a good man." He was, and he left me some interesting reading material. I think it's time Derek and Susan learned what happens when you prey on the wrong family. "What did you have in mind?" I looked at the 2 sets of documents, separated by a decade, but telling the same story of greed and manipulation. "Justice," I said, "with a little help from some friends." Mr. Collins arrived that afternoon, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of unremarkable gray suit that made him invisible in a crowd, perfect for a private investigator. "Harold was thorough," he said, spreading additional photographs across the desk. "Your daughter and Derek have been busy since Phoenix. 3 elderly victims in the past year alone. What's their pattern? Reconnect with family members who inherit money. Apply pressure through guilt and intimidation. If that fails," he slid over a police report. "Mrs. Henderson in Tucson fell down her stairs 2 days after refusing to share her late husband's life insurance. Convenient accident." I studied. The photos. Susan laughing at an expensive restaurant. Derek counting cash in a hotel parking lot. Both of them walking out of a bank with satisfied expressions. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Get them talking. Alone. Let them think they've won." He pulled a small device from his briefcase. "Wireless microphone. Sheriff Patterson will be parked outside recording everything. When we have enough, he'll move in." "Is it safe?" Collins looked me in the eyes. "Derek's dangerous, but he's also arrogant, thinks he's smarter than everyone else. That arrogance will hang him." That evening, Susan called. "Mom, we've been thinking. Maybe we came on too strong yesterday. Derek feels terrible about those things he said." "Does he?" "We just want what's best for you. This house is so isolated. What if something happened?" "We've decided," Derek said, pushing past me into the foyer. "Talking isn't getting us anywhere. We're moving in." The microphone felt warm against my skin. Somewhere outside, Sheriff Patterson was listening to every word. "You can't just move in," I said. Derek dropped the bags in the marble. I let her talk while Collins attached the tiny microphone to my blouse. It felt like wearing my own heart monitor. "You're right," I said finally. "It is isolated. Maybe we should meet tomorrow and discuss arrangements." "Really?" The relief in her voice was audible. "That's wonderful. We could come by around 2. "Sounds perfect. Just us family. No lawyers, no outsiders. Just family. Exactly. Just family." After I hung up, Collins tested the equipment. My voice came through clearly on his receiver. "Sheriff Patterson will park at the corner," he said. "He'll hear everything. The moment Derek makes a direct threat or confesses to anything, We move in. What if they get suspicious? They won't. They think you're a frightened old woman about to give them millions of dollars. Greed makes people stupid. Susan and Derek arrived at 2 sharp, but they weren't alone this time. Derek carried 2 duffel bags. Susan wheeled a suitcase behind her. "What's all this?" I asked from the entryway like he was claiming territory. "Watch me. Nice place, by the way, real nice. Susan, go pick out our bedroom, something with a view, Derek." Susan hesitated. "Maybe we should." "Should what?" "Ask permission." He laughed. "She's lucky we're here. Old lady living alone in a house worth millions." Accidents happen all the time. I backed toward the sitting room, making sure they followed. "What kind of accidents?" "Oh, falls downstairs, gas leaks, house fires." Derek settled into Harold's favorite chair like he owned it. "Terrible tragedies happen to old folks every day." Susan looked uncomfortable. "Derek, don't!" "Don't what?" "Tell the truth." He leaned forward. "Your mother's got 2 choices, Susan. Share nicely or have a very unfortunate accident, just like that Henderson woman in Tucson." I sank into a chair, letting my hands shake. "You killed Mrs. Henderson." "Sure did. Pushed her right down those stairs." Derek's eyes glittered. "But you're still healthy, aren't you? Still got some fight left. That can be fixed." Susan stood abruptly. "I'm getting some air." "Sit down," Derek snapped. "We're not done here." "Yes, we are," Susan said. But she sat. Derek turned back to me. "Here's how this works. You sign papers tomorrow, making us joint owners of everything. We all live here like one big happy family. Or," he shrugged, "let's just say this house has a lot of stairs, and you're getting older, clumsier. You're threatening to kill me. I'm stating facts. Bad things happen to people who don't cooperate. Ask the Hendersons. Oh, wait, you can't. They're all dead." My heart hammered against the microphone. Outside, Sheriff Patterson had everything he needed. "All of them?" I whispered. Derek grinned. Son came sniffing around asking questions about his mother's accident. Had his own accident a week later. Car went off a cliff. Very tragic. "Derek, stop," Susan pleaded. "Why?" "She needs to understand what happens to people who cross us." He stood and walked to me, looming over my chair. "You're going to sign those papers, old woman, or you're going to have a very bad fall tonight." That's when the front door exploded open. "Sheriff's Department. Nobody move." Sheriff Patterson burst through the door with 2 deputies behind him, guns drawn. "Hands where I can see them now." Derek spun around, his face going from arrogant to panicked in the space of a heartbeat. "What the hell, Derek Morrison? You're under arrest for the murders of Eleanor Henderson and James Henderson, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and making terroristic threats." Susan scrambled backward toward the window. "This is a mistake. We didn't do anything." "We heard everything, Miss Sullivan," Sheriff Patterson said, gesturing to one of his deputies who held up a recording device. "Wireless microphone. Every word you said in the last hour is on tape." Derek's eyes found the tiny microphone pinned to my blouse. "You set us up." "I gave you enough rope," I said, standing on steadier legs than I'd shown them. "You hanged yourselves." The deputy moved toward Susan. "Susan Sullivan, you're under arrest as an accessory to murder and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." "No!" Susan's voice cracked. "I didn't kill anyone. That was all Derek. I just wanted the money." "You just helped him target victims," Sheriff Patterson said, "including your own mother." Derek made a break for the back door. He made it 3 steps before the second deputy tackled him to the marble floor. The sound echoed through Harold's house like a gunshot. "You have the right to remain silent," the deputy said, pulling Derek's arms behind his back. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Derek twisted his head to look at me. "This isn't over. I've got friends, people who owe me favors. You'll never be safe." Sheriff Patterson knelt beside him. The only place? You're going is death row, Morrison. We've been hunting you for 2 years. Thanks to Mrs. Sullivan, we finally got you. As they hauled Derek to his feet, handcuffs biting into his wrists, I walked to Harold's desk and opened the bottom drawer. I pulled out both sets of documents, Harold's investigation and the papers I'd hidden for 10 years. Sheriff, you'll want these for your case files. He flipped through them, whistling low. Bank fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and these signatures. He looked at Susan, who was crying quietly in handcuffs. Your daughter's been busy. She made her choices, I said, 10 years ago and every day since. They led Susan past me toward the door. She stopped, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the 20-year-old girl who'd chosen Derek over her sick mother, who'd abandoned me to chase easy money, who'd just threatened to kill me for an inheritance. No, you're not, I said quietly. You're sorry you got caught. She sobbed harder as the deputy guided her outside. Derek was the last to leave. At the threshold, he turned back one more time. You think you won? You're still just a lonely old woman in a big empty house. Nothing changes that. I smiled. You're wrong about one thing, Derek. It's not empty anymore. It's peaceful. The door closed behind them with a solid click. Sheriff Patterson lingered to take my statement and collect the evidence. You were brave tonight, Mrs. Sullivan. Foolish, maybe, but brave. Harold always said courage was just stubbornness wearing a better dress. He laughed. Smart man. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. I'll be there. After everyone left, I walked through Harold's house, my house, turning off lights and checking locks. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was earned. In Harold's study, I sat in his leather chair and looked at the scattered papers on the desk. Evidence of greed that had finally met its match. I gathered the documents into neat piles and locked them in Harold's safe. Tomorrow, I'd call Mr. Brennan about changing the locks and updating the security system. Derek's friends, if he had any, wouldn't find an easy target here. The house settled around me with small creaks and sighs. I made tea in Harold's kitchen and sat at his table, watching the steam rise from the cup. It was over. Derek would face trial for murder. Susan would likely spend years in prison. The inheritance Harold left me would stay exactly where he intended it. 6 months later, I received 2 letters on the same day. The first was from the Chiu District Attorney's Office. Derek had been convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The jury had deliberated for less than 3 hours. Apparently, threatening to kill an elderly woman on tape makes for a short trial. The second letter was from Susan. The return address showed the women's correctional facility in Phoenix, where she was serving 8 years for conspiracy and fraud. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity, that old enemy of peace, got the better of me. Dear Mom, it began, and I had to stop reading for a moment. After everything, she still called me that. She wrote about prison routine, about the classes she was taking, about how sorry she was, the usual things people write when they have nothing but time to think about their mistakes. But at the end, she wrote something that surprised me. I know you probably won't visit or write back. I understand why, but I wanted you to know that I am really sorry for everything. You deserve a better daughter than I will ever be. I folded the letter and put it in Harold's desk drawer next to the documents that had brought Derek down. Maybe someday I'd answer it. Maybe not. Some bridges burn for good reasons. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Should Susan get any sympathy for being manipulated by Derek, or was she just as guilty as he was? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine.